Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Love, Crimes of Passion series, episode 16.
Oh, wow. Episode 16 already.
I know, right? Time flies when you're deep diving into these cases, but this season we've been exploring how, love, obsession, and betrayal can twist into something dark, something criminal.
Yeah, it's that dark side of human nature.
Exactly. And you, dear listener, already know this story. You've taken the time to learn about the Jalandhar lover's revenge, but today we're going to go deeper.
Much deeper.
We're going beyond the headlines, beyond the surface, to uncover the complexities of a love story that turned deadly.
What's fascinating here is how quickly a whirlwind romance can transform into a tragedy.
Right.
These cases often start with intense passion, almost like a fairy tale beginning.
Yeah, the honeymoon phase.
Exactly, but beneath the surface, there are cracks, vulnerabilities that can easily escalate under pressure.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have Ankit, a young mechanic with big dreams, and Preeti, a college student from a well-off family.
Two very different worlds.
Yeah, and their paths crossed at a local fair in Jalandhar, and it was practically love at first sight, at least for Ankit.
He was completely smitten, deeply devoted to Preeti.
Head over heels.
Absolutely. He showered her with attention, made grand gestures, and truly believed they were destined to be together.
Sounds like the classic romantic.
It does, but this intensity, while initially romantic, became a point of friction.
So too much of a good thing.
Sometimes, yes.
So here's where it gets really interesting, right? Preeti, while enjoying the attention at first, began to feel stifled.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Ankit's expectations, his vision of their future, didn't align with her own ambitions.
Right. Different goals, different paths.
Plus, there was the added pressure of her family's disapproval.
Oh, that's never easy.
He had different plans for her, involving a wealthy businessman named Raghav.
So you have this disapproval from Preeti's family that adds another layer of complexity, right? It's not just about two individuals navigating a relationship, but about colliding worlds.
Right, clashing values.
Yeah, and the weight of those societal expectations.
And tragically, it seems these pressures became too much for Preeti to bear. She made a choice,
A difficult one, I'm sure.
a heartbreaking choice for Ankit, to end their relationship and accept Raghav's proposal.
This rejection, for someone like Ankit who had invested so much so intensely, was a crushing blow. His world, the future he had envisioned with Preeti, shattered.
It's understandable to feel heartbroken, but how does that heartbreak morph into something as dark as revenge?
Well, this is where the psychology of possessive love comes into play.
Possessive love.
For Ankit, Preeti wasn't simply a girlfriend, she was an obsession.
Ah, I see.
He felt entitled to her love, her future.
Almost like she was his possession.
In a way, yes. And when she rejected him, it wasn't just a personal loss, it was a perceived injustice.
So instead of moving on, Ankit fixates on this injustice. His love, twisted by anger and resentment, becomes a dangerous obsession.
It festers and grows.
He begins to plan his revenge, focusing on Preeti and her new fiancé, Raghav.
He learns about a pre-wedding celebration at a banquet hall in Jalandhar and decides this will be his moment.
A pre-wedding celebration.
Think about it as celebration, a symbol of happiness and new beginnings, becoming the backdrop for a horrific act of violence. It's chilling.
It's like something out of a nightmare.
It really is. This joyful occasion, filled with family and friends, turns into a scene of chaos and terror.
So Ankit lies in wait, watching as the celebration winds down.
When Preeti and Raghav emerge from the hall, he confronts them, unleashing a torrent of accusations, blaming Preeti for his pain, his shattered dreams.
So it starts with a confrontation, a public display of his anger and hurt. But how did this escalate into physical violence?
Well, it's important to remember that we're dealing with a deeply troubled individual.
Right.
Ankit's emotional state, fueled by possessiveness and a refusal to accept Preeti's decision, has reached a boiling point. He's lost control.
So in the midst of this heated argument, Ankit snaps. He pulls out a knife, and in a fit of rage, attacks Raghav, stabbing him repeatedly.
It's a brutal, frenzied attack. The scene becomes chaotic, people screaming, trying to intervene, but Ankit is consumed by his fury.
And what about Preeti? Was she just a bystander in all of this?
Tragically, no. As she tries to stop Ankit to shield Raghav, he turns on her, stabbing her multiple times as well.
Oh, no.
This act demonstrates the indiscriminate nature of such violence, born from a sense of entitlement and an inability to process rejection.
It's heartbreaking. So we have a man driven to murder, a young life tragically cut short, and a woman critically injured both victims of a love warped into something toxic and destructive.
It's a stark reminder of how love can turn into something dark and dangerous.
What happens in the immediate aftermath of this attack?
Realizing the gravity of his actions, Ankit flees the scene, leaving behind a trail of devastation.
And that, dear listener, is where part 1 of our deep dive ends.
So Ankit, he flees the scene, right? This celebration, he just completely shattered it, leaves this trail of devastation, and now the weight of his actions are setting in.
It's a stark reminder, of how quickly a moment of joy, like all these celebrations and everything going on, can just instantly transform into a nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
And as the police arrive, they're faced with this, just absolute chaos. This shattered scene.
Trying to put the pieces together.
Yeah, a puzzle of love, betrayal, and ultimately murder.
And a crime like this, it isn't just about collecting physical evidence, fingerprints and all that.
Right.
It's about delving into the minds of those involved, understanding the motivations, the twisted emotions that led to such a horrific act.
So how did the Jalandhar police approach this case? What were the key elements that helped them build their case against Ankit?
Well, the banquet hall, thankfully, was equipped with security cameras,
Wow.
and the footage captured Ankit's arrival, his movements, and most crucially, the confrontation itself.
That's damning evidence, right there on tape. It places him at the scene, involved in the argument that escalated into violence. But did they have eyewitness accounts to corroborate the footage?
Oh, absolutely. There were numerous guests at the celebration who witnessed, everything unfold.
Yeah.
They provided detailed descriptions of Ankit, his demeanor, the heated exchange between him, Preeti, and Raghav.
So you have human observation and technology working in tandem, creating this really compelling narrative of the events leading up to the attack.
But where was Ankit? Did he simply vanish?
Not exactly. He went into hiding, seeking refuge with relatives outside of Jalandhar.
Okay.
But the police, leveraging, mobile phone tracking technology, were able to trace his movements.
So they were on his trail.
Yeah.
2 days after the attack, the police close in, arresting Ankit at his relative's home.
Wow.
I imagine that must have been a tense moment, the culmination of a frantic search for a man who had committed a horrific crime.
And during interrogation, something unexpected happened. Ankit confessed. He admitted to the stabbing, claiming that he acted out of a profound sense of heartbreak and betrayal. A confession like that can be a crucial turning point in a trial. But even with a confession, the prosecution still needs to build a strong case to prove intent, premeditation, and to ensure justice is served right.
Oh, absolutely.
So what happened?
The prosecution in this case, they took a strategic approach. They focused on painting Ankit as a calculating individual, someone who couldn't handle rejection, and who methodically planned this act of revenge.
It sounds like they were building a narrative of premeditation, dismantling the idea that this was a crime purely fueled by a sudden burst of passion.
Exactly.
But what about the defense? How did they counter this portrayal?
Well, the defense, as you might expect, tried to paint a different picture of Ankit. They focused on his emotional state, arguing that he wasn't in control of his actions, that he was driven to a point of desperation by the pain of heartbreak.
So we have two contrasting narratives emerging. The prosecution emphasizing premeditation, cold calculation, while the defense argues for a crime fueled by a broken heart, a man pushed to the brink. It sets up a fascinating legal battle, each side vying to sway the jury to their perspective. What specific legal strategies did the defense employ?
Well, they called upon a psychologist to assess Ankit's mental state at the time of the crime.
Okay.
And the psychologist's testimony suggested that Ankit's obsessive love for Preeti, combined with his inability to cope with rejection, created a perfect storm of emotional turmoil that ultimately led to the tragic events at the banquet hall.
It seems they were trying to introduce the concept of diminished responsibility, arguing that Ankit's mental state at the time of the crime mitigated his culpability. Did this strategy resonate with the jury?
Not entirely. While the defense's arguments undoubtedly added a layer of complexity to the case, the prosecution effectively countered by highlighting Ankit's actions leading up to the attack. They presented evidence of his planning, his stalking of Preeti and Raghav, arguing that this demonstrated premeditation, a clear intent to cause harm.
So it became a battle of narratives. The defense focused on the emotional turmoil, the psychological factors that contributed to Ankit's actions, while the prosecution meticulously built a case of premeditation, demonstrating that this wasn't simply a spur-of-the-moment act of passion. The jury was left to weigh these competing narratives and ultimately decide Ankit's fate. And that verdict, dear listener, is what we'll delve into in the final part of our deep dive. So the jury, they had a lot to consider, didn't they? Weighing the prosecution's narrative of premeditation against the defense's argument of, man driven to desperation by a broken heart.
Absolutely. Tough decision.
Yeah, and this whole case, it forces us to confront these complexities of human behavior, the gray areas between love, obsession, and violence.
It's not black and white, is it?
No, it's definitely not. So what was the verdict?
The verdict, after weeks of deliberation, was Ankit Sharma was found guilty of both murder and attempted murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for the death of Raghav, with an additional 10 years for the attack on Preeti.
That's a heavy sentence.
It is.
One that really underscores the gravity of his actions, but it also raises questions.
Oh, it definitely does.
Questions about justice, accountability, and the role of mental health in criminal cases.
Absolutely. This case, it's not just about Ankit Sharma.
Yeah.
It's about a system that often struggles to address the underlying issues that contribute to these types of tragedies. You see a young man driven to a point of no return by heartbreak, a woman caught in the crossfire, and a family forever shattered by loss.
And Preeti, she survived the attack, but the physical and emotional scars run deep.
I can't imagine.
She chose to leave Jalandhar, seeking a fresh start, a chance to rebuild her life. But the trauma of that night, the loss of Raghav, will undoubtedly stay with her.
This case really, it serves as a stark reminder, right, of the need for greater awareness of mental health, especially among young men. We need to create spaces where they feel safe to express their emotions, to seek help without stigma, to develop healthier coping mechanisms for dealing with, rejection and loss.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the legal aspects of a case like this.
Yeah.
The verdict, the sentencing.
The facts of the case.
But we can't lose sight of the human cost. There are no winners in this story. Only victims.
And beyond the immediate victims, right, there's a ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
Families torn apart, communities grappling with the aftermath of violence, and a society left to confront uncomfortable truths about the dark side of human nature.
The Jalandhar lover's revenge is a tragic story, but it also holds valuable lessons.
I think so.
It challenges us to examine our own beliefs about love, relationships, and the dangers of possessiveness.
Yeah.
It compels us to advocate for better mental health resources and to work towards creating a culture where seeking help is seen as a strength, not a weakness.
It's about breaking down those stigmas.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Jalandhar lover's revenge.
It's been a pleasure.
It's a story that stays with you, prompting reflection, challenging assumptions, and hopefully inspiring us all to be a little kinder, a little more understanding, and a little more vigilant in recognizing the warning signs of unhealthy relationships.
If you or someone you know is struggling with relationship problems, mental health challenges, or thoughts of violence, please reach out for help.
That's right.
There are resources available, and you don't have to go through this alone.
And don't forget to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle for more deep dives into these thought-provoking cases that explore the complexities of human behavior and the criminal justice system.
Until next time.